You'll see. It's bienvenue, welcome one and all to another podcast. This one is called Property Matters and stars the inimitable Hamish McClay of Search Convey. Today's guest is Sam Robertson from Gunnercook. We know Gunnercook of old, of course, through Property Matters. Shameless plug. 10 o'clock on Thursdays. Do come along. But today we're talking about something that affects a lot of people on the property market. And that's, of course, property law. Is it under pressure or is it just sailing quite fine? And, of course, as usual, Hamish, would you kick us off?
Well, I think one of the sad things is, and we are experiencing all the time, I'm fortunate. I'm not myself a property lawyer, but the work that we actually do supports property lawyers in terms of what does actually sort of go on. And we can always feel the pressure that is coming back from them, because time is important anyway within transactions, because everybody wants it. Everybody wants the transaction to take place so the move can coincide with what that client wants to do, what that buyer wants to do, what that seller wants to do. And unfortunately, we have so many things coming in to impose pressures from different directions. We've got an awful lot which is happening at the moment. And in fairness to the government, they're trying to put in place a system which is going to enable more properties to go on the market and get everything done more efficiently. The trouble is they're just overloading everything at the moment because there's so much chop and change. So whatever pressure was there on the time restraints that the likes of Sam has to go through, that was challenging in itself. Just to compound the issue even more significantly, we've got the stamp duty change coming up at the end of this month. So it's really speaking about almost day-to-day pressures, because they're there all the time, on what ways there are around actually sort of getting through those. But first of all, realistically, it's probably an idea, Sam, though, because what we're trying to do is to educate the public about the situation they find themselves in when they go down that conveyancing route. Many of them don't know, many of them don't understand. And as we've found, even those who've been through the experience previously, instead of people turning around and going back, I mean, I don't look this old. I've only been in the business for 20 years. It's told that it's taken. But when we go back to 20 years ago, when I first embarked on the search solutions, as we called ourselves, the average the average length of time people were spending in their properties was 8 years. It's now over 20 years they will tend to spend in their property for very, very good reason. Okay, some are doing it quicker. However, people aren't that, they don't know what the changes are, what's actually happening, and the pressures, the additional pressures that keep coming to the likes of Sam. So we better speak to her about what pressures she's under on a day-to-day basis to help lionize law to sort of, what does lionized law feel is imposing on them and slowing down things for their clients?
All right, Sam, there's a lot to unpack there. Before you get into it, it occurs to me that here we are, as Hamish has made plain, people wanting and exhibiting the need to stay in a property, up to 3 times as long as they ever used to. Yet, it seems less and less distinct what the passage of law is as far as the common man or woman. It still seems to be quite covered in mystery of how you get from the point of I have a bunch of money or access to it to I own a property.
Yeah, do you know what? I think it's a funny one, and I think a lot of the timing issues at the moment are certainly caused by the media and all the recent announcement, in particular, the stamp duty changes that are coming into play at the end of the month. So that creates, a further pressure. But it's amazing to know how many people actually are not even aware of these changes. So you get one half of clients who come to you saying, I've got to have this, completed before the end of March.
Absolutely.
Other people not aware of it, and it's our duty to make sure we are telling people, because that has a huge impact in costings. If we complete the week after and complete in April, a huge impact on the extra stamp duty. So it's I think we need to educate more. I think there needs to be more education in the whole conveyancing process.
It just seems to me that it's very difficult to know if you're doing it right. It's not as obvious as if you go to a bricklayer and say, I want to build a wall. There's how many bricks, how much concrete, how much time it will take, and you can sort of predict it. Yet with this, it's supposed to be a prescriptive process, and yet it could be 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years. And Hamish and his crew, who seem to be giving more detail and more focus and more local knowledge, also seem to get it done in half the time. Well, there's just no logic to any of this.
No. Do you know what? I think actually, I will say that the local searches, we used to, say, you're waiting, quite some weeks for local searches, but at the moment I'm receiving local searches back a lot quicker. But there's many factors that slow down a conveyancing transaction. If you've got a chain involved, that can be an absolute nightmare. It depends, how big the chain is, how that chain's being like the funding of that chain. If we're waiting on funds at the bottom end of the chain. Just recently, I'm acting on one where they're waiting on some funds to come in, and we can't even start the chain until that's addressed. So it's timings vary on every transaction, and I think that's a difficulty. You cannot say to a client, I get asked this on a daily basis, how long will this take? And it's just impossible to give a definitive answer. We can guide them through the process, but there's so many other factors that contribute to those timings. How quick the other side are acting, how quick the communication with their client is, because it's not always our end. Sometimes you're waiting on client due diligence, you're waiting on ID, you're waiting on source of funds. It's all these things in a transaction which can impact those timings.
Was it not Fleetwood Mac that once said, chains keep us together? Well, the whole point about this is we want to break that chain so that people can get on with their lives. They seem stuck in that chain for an inordinate amount of time, Hamish.
Well, yes, I actually remember it back to the time it was Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac.
Oh my, Hamish, I was only reading up about that only the other day. You're showing your age. Go on, carry on.
I was hopeful it was my knowledge rather than my age, but they're amazing band, and so too, because it was Peter Green who wrote
the top guitarists of his peer group at the time.
Oh yes, and Albatross was one of those beautiful meditational types of bits of music you could listen to. Which
meditative songs, notwithstanding, what the flip is going on?
Well, I think this is the challenge, and Sam sort of picked up on it, but not entirely, in that when you actually sort of go back several years ago now, it wasn't source of, it wasn't two aspects there. Anti-money laundering, well, that's a financial caper. Why on earth should solicitors be getting, but it's been dumped in the laps of solicitors. Hey, you've got to check this out. I mean, okay, a lot of other people are doing it as well, but it's become it's an embracing part of, and there's a much bigger demand now because of what's going on worldwide. The source of funds, where's the money coming from? So those are just two additional aspects that come in, and sometimes it can take forever to track down the full source of those particular funds. However, it might, you have the challenges from both ends, don't you, Sam? You get where's the source of the funds, and how the heck where's the money going to come from? Because they're taking, that can be one of the things which are holding up at the moment. Somebody wanted to say, all right, I've just found this property. Can I get the searches in before the end of the month? Absolutely, you can get everything. But what if you need money? And in fact, what we're finding, of course, it's the broker. The broker's challenging getting the money together to get that. And then you've got companies like Nationwide sort of jumping in, change the rules just as you think you're about to exchange. Oh, hang on, it's all changed. You thought you had the money, but you've got to answer these questions now. So that's another 2 weeks down the road. So there's all these things these facets keep adding in, and it must be a tremendous struggle for Sam. Because from the opposite end, we've got a situation. We think we've got it tied up. We think we're a few days away from getting that information coming in. Somebody turns around like Harrogate have just done. All right, chappies, we're stopping in a week's time, and you can't get any research reports coming back in until sometime midway through April.
That seems to be madness. Sam, how do you deal with such uncertainties?
Do you know what? It is an area of uncertainty, and there's so many changes at the minute. And, there's also the protocol forms. And we say that there is so many additional tasks being placed on a residential conveyancer now. And we're trying to do these additional tasks, but competing with these fee drops. So we're actually doing more work and trying to compete with lower fees, which, that's where I think that's a personal know your value and know your job, because it's very easy to get dragged down with this. But we've also got the protocol forms, which are being changed heavily. Now, the burden being placed on sellers to understand what they're putting onto those forms, it then is an additional task for us to go through those forms, which are really detailed now. And there's a lot of questions. We briefly spoke before we went live on this episode about the Building Safety Act. There's questions on there about the Building Safety Act, which as a lay person does not understand, and it's more and more work for us to add to these things, which again, like we say, is adding to the timings. We need to make sure we're keeping up to date with the law, the stamp duty changes, new protocol forms. There's all the leasehold reforms currently ongoing, the rent bill. There's a lot at the minute that we need to keep on top of, and a lot of extra burden being placed on conveyancers.
Now, I'd like to change and shift what we're talking about slightly, Hamish. What is the human cost?
I think this is a very, very important aspect which many of us have missed out on. I did actually sort of mention it sort of briefly when I was sort of writing one of the articles. It is quite a significant cost. I mean, when we look at the technology which is demanded, now most people are keeping level with the technology, and any conveyancer is trying to do what they can to find the best way through which technology ought to be used, which data, source of data, and aspects of that particular nature. But there's a bombardment coming in. It's almost like hailstones. Whereas you had a light drizzle, then it became a rain. Now it's really a hailstorm, because from every single direction, there's somebody telling you they have the best solution for this type of information, the best solution for that type of information. And there are many conveyancers, particularly experienced ones, who are turning around and they're saying, well, stuff, if I need to know why do I need to know all this new stuff? It takes time to learn it. I just can't be bothered with it. I think I'll just get the heck out of it. So they are leaving.
It's understandable why people would say that, but the problem is we've got all this uncertainty, plus we've got all this potential of people pulling out rugs at the last possible second. And this cannot lead to anything but trauma, I would have thought.
I mean, this is one of the sad aspects. And when we speak, again, we're very fortunate. We do carry out the number of podcasts, so we get the feedback from solicitors as well. And we actually find out that people are actually pulling out of leaseholds now because they've become much too complicated. People are pulling out of to do with flats now. If you go to buy a flat, there's so much more information that you need to hunt through, particularly from a solicitor's perspective. I really do feel for the journey the poor unsuspecting sort of buyer or seller goes through without sort of understanding what is going on in the background now, which wasn't happening 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, which is just making it all the more complicated. And when you get ideas being brought in and laws being changed by people who do not understand fully the system, they're not speaking to the lawyers. They're not speaking to the likes of Sam about what needs to be done. They're listening to somebody who says, oh, I found this great solution. But it's not helpful in property law, or it cannot be actually, which is why, Sam did mention this. The Building Safety Act has caused far more damage than what had actually gone on before Grenfell.
I think,
that's
but
what
I
I
heard well, obviously it's not me saying this, but I heard the expression in passing of half-assed. The Building Safety Act, that is.
say sorry about it.
That it's half-assed.
Yes, I think that's. I mean, half-baked is probably something that somebody else might use, but yes.
Well, look, I just wanted to say thank you so much for Sam. Hope it's our first time on Property Matters. Hope it wasn't too much of a baptism by fire. She is to be found at Gunner Cook, and she's all about lionising law. Hamish McClay, of course, of Search and Convey. And to all of you out there, remember there's much more knowledge that's going to be coming across through Property Matters in the coming weeks. Don't miss out on Property Quorum, 10 o'clock on Thursdays. Ipsa kind of magic tomorrow. At what time we have? 1 o'clock?
1 o'clock again.
1 o'clock again. Please come along to that if you want to learn about the independent personal search agents, the current chaired by Hamish, and what find out about the amazing work they do in shortening, bizarrely. It still makes no sense to me. They shorten the time to get the searches by doing more work on the searches. Nope, doesn't make more sense to me either. But if you want to find out more about that, do come along tomorrow. And of course, on Friday, we have one of our, I would say, our high-flying podcasts. And they're all high-flying, but this one seems to get a lot of mentions, which is Cladding Matters, which is going to be at 3 o'clock, I believe.
1 o'clock?
Sorry?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock as well. There you go. Little do I know. 1 o'clock on Friday. And then we actually have a gentleman there, James, who is actually currently fighting to get more clarity on all of these kind of issues while living within a property at Royal Artillery Quays, one of those condemned properties built by Barrett. I never said that. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Until next time, try and keep your feet on the ground, but keep reaching for the stars. Take care. Bye-bye.